Hello, my name is Alexandra Emanuele, and I'm the digital content editor with GFSR. Today I'll be speaking with Dr. Brita Ball. Brita is a food safety and training specialist, and she's the principal consultant at Brita Ball and Associates. We'll be speaking about food safety culture and COVID-19. Thank you for chatting with me, Brita.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Um, you wrote an excellent blog article about how COVID-19 could help drive food safety culture improvements earlier in the pandemic. For those who haven't read it yet, would you sum that up briefly for us?
Yes, I can do that. And first, I'd like to start off by saying it's sad that so many people have become sick or died from COVID-19. And this pandemic has required numerous changes in how we operate businesses, as well as how we live our lives, protecting ourselves and others. And so there is a sad part to it. And we've just got to kind of move on and adapt as we're faced with the challenges of today. And so from a food safety perspective, food industry perspective, and a food safety perspective, this pandemic has created an opportunity for businesses to advance their food safety culture really faster than any other time. And the reason for that is primarily because of risk management. So the article that I wrote talked about different things, but the focus really was about risk management. If food industry leaders have had a hard time getting their heads around food safety risk, coronavirus risk has really made it possible for them to sort of grasp this idea of an invisible risk. So the invisible risk of coronavirus, if managed effectively, can then reduce the health and safety risk of people within a company. And then we put that in sort of like a parallel with food safety. If we look at food safety as the invisible risk of, say, pathogens or chemicals or toxins, those could be invisible risks. And if people don't understand those invisible risks, then they're not going to be interested in looking at food safety culture. So the COVID-19 or the coronavirus risk as an invisible risk has supported the idea of risk management being important in a food business. And so the invisible risks of food safety can't be easily ignored anymore when companies have started to realize that the invisible risk of coronavirus is real for them. So then putting food safety and health and safety on the table, both of them on the table with other business and financial risks, that is what is an opportunity to that's the opportunity that companies have now. Not just look at business risks or environmental risks or financial risks in general term, but actually say what is the environmental and so the health and safety risk to the company, but then let's bring food safety forward and say what's the food safety risk that we are faced as a company. And so when that happens in a risk management perspective from the boardroom, top down, that it can be much more effectively managed. So the pandemic has created this opportunity for risk management discussions to include food safety where they might not have been might have had food safety involved in those risk management discussions. So like I said, just like they're adding health and safety risk to the discussion. And then the other thing that the article was about was not just the risk management from a high perspective, from the perspective of senior leadership, but also the having it in multiple layers. The influence can be from the top down, but also it comes in the middle line and the front line, and we realize now with the coronavirus, it has to take ownership that people have to take ownership at all levels. Because when we look at it from the perspective of the pieces that have been put in place to protect workers are now saying, well, this matters to me, and that happening at the front line, and that's kind of going up, and not just a top down kind of not just top down effort, but it's a middle, top down, and front line up effort with the coronavirus risk. And if we look at that in food safety risks, then we can be saying, how are we going to use this going forward and we listen to the frontline people. We can listen to the frontline people about their concerns about food safety, and as well as the senior management level of their concerns about food safety and what impact it might have on the business. So it's that kind of thing in terms of multiple layers of influence. And then the other element is about a risk management mindset. And that's a mindset of being able to see risks as hazards that we need to reduce reduce the hazards that are going to potentially go out to the customer. In the COVID world, we're looking at reducing the risk to our employees that might be affected by airborne aerosols that have the fomites, and we don't want that to happen. And so we're taking a little bit more concern, we're taking more care in dealing with that, so that we're looking at we've got a mindset of how are we going to manage things more effectively. And I take that as different from the beginning. With a strategic level, the senior managers are looking at it from a business strategic level, and then the risk management mindset throughout the organization with health and safety leaders and food safety leaders who are actually working with the people making the changes. That's going to be this COVID operation. Sorry, not the COVID operation. The coronavirus pandemic has enabled this kind of thing to come to the forefront and people to start working together. So in smaller operations, food safety professionals who have had risk management experience, they may have taken the lead in the COVID management. In other cases, the occupational health and safety personnel or managing the crisis. And it's now there's an opportunity to look at how these groups can come together. So that was another part of the article. And then the third part of the article was really about improved communication and follow-up, and that the COVID-19 situation has given senior leaders a good reason to direct managers and supervisors in all departments across the company to take specific actions to mitigate the coronavirus risk. And, for example, have conversations about the importance of hand hygiene. And those conversations also have a food safety focus. And they're relevant now to food safety, they're relevant now to worker health overall. And so a hand hygiene enforcement is really about saving employees' lives. It's about making sure that people are protecting each other, and that is also, that's part of food safety. Now that's where that sort of intersects. So improved communication all the way up and down the organization, and follow up with respect to supervisors, making sure that people are doing what it is that they should be doing. With coronavirus, people are thinking, well, I better be doing this because I might get sick, as opposed to food safety, where it's, I better be doing this because my supervisor tells me. Mm-hmm. If we can start using that and say you're doing food safety to protect the customer, just as you do the health and safety things to protect yourself and your colleagues, we try to make that make the link to who benefits from the outcome. So that's where the improved communication happens, and then the improved follow-up with respect to supervisors and managers, making sure that people are actually following through doing what they're supposed to be doing, whether it's coronavirus risk management or food safety risk management. And then the final thing is really about that, is about culture, and that in either way, culture, whatever your culture is, it's helping or to advance, or it's hurting the focus on food safety. Culture, either way, is helping to advance or hurt the focus on coronavirus safety or health, occupational health and safety. So those are the really key areas in the article.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just touched on this, but I was hoping that you might be able to expand a little bit more. How do you think that, coronavirus has really, been a driving force? And you really get into this in the article, which I would highly recommend everyone take a look for. Improving or potentially improving, you posit in your article, food safety culture, or just maybe, creating more of a food safety culture because of some of the things that I think you just mentioned. But maybe if you could just get into it a little bit more.
Yeah, so so I've heard people say we don't have a food safety culture, and what they really are meaning to say, we don't have a positive food safety culture. We don't have a strong positive food safety culture. So in any case, if you've got a food company, you have a food safety culture. You may not like the food safety culture you have, but you have one. So if you're wanting to improve it, to improve food safety compliance, to reduce food safety risk, then you can make changes to improve your organizational culture that focuses on food safety. And where we are right now, is that if we can get senior management to look at an enterprise level risk management, we include food safety in those discussions about risk management, then that's when senior leadership can get focused about, well, I guess food safety really is important enough to have it at the senior level strategic discussions about risk management, because it really can impact your business. It can if there's a recall or an outbreak associated with your company, it can destroy the company. And so it really needs to be food safety really needs to be talked about at an enterprise level in with respect to risk management. And so putting it into culture, then we want to improve the culture, and we want to make changes to continue improvement with the culture. And so that's where, with the coronavirus, we have the opportunity to, we've seen how change can happen rapidly, and we can take advantage of the changes that are happening now. And people they're in a little bit of an unstable in the sense of, we're really not sure what's going to be happening yet. And so we're in a fluid sort of a situation where we're having to adapt. We're learning new things about the coronavirus, and now there are new strains that are out that are maybe more infective, infectious, maybe longer lasting, maybe more serious. We don't know some of the answer to those questions. But from a food safety perspective, when we're in this flux, as the changes happening dealing with health and safety and coronavirus, we can use this opportunity to say, all right, so what can we do? We need to making an adjustment in culture, and we'll make an adjustment in a sort of a risk management culture that includes food safety and occupational health and safety. And then when things sort of settle down and stabilize in a new place, we'll not be like this. We'll maybe be like this, and we'll stabilize that because we've had to make changes to address occupational health and safety, and we can do food safety at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, taking some positives out of a truly awful situation and circumstance. I mean, I think that's kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, as it were, that we can kind of get from this whole situation, is that, you know, maybe we're learning some good practices that we can all take, and especially, you know, into this food safety culture. I just want to wrap it up with a quick final question. Have you noticed any significant actions food companies have made to improve food safety culture since the pandemic started?
So I haven't seen any specific actions related to food safety culture improvements, but I am aware of changes that companies have made that will have a positive impact on food safety, possible food safety outcomes. And that is, for example, that a lot of companies have looked at, or companies that are progressive anyway, have really looked at their sanitation programs and their sanitation procedures. And that's because if somebody coughs in a plant, what's the area that you're going to have to, cordon off and sanitize and clean up, just from a health and safety perspective. So what I've seen is that companies have improved their sanitation, and they've made changes in their sanitation programs. They've really reviewed their sanitation programs and the systems that they have for keeping their whole organization clean, not just the equipment, of food safety equipment, but all of the everywhere around the organization, the doorknobs, the washrooms, the locker rooms, the hallways are now being looked at much more carefully with respect to the coronavirus and the health and safety aspect of things. And that's going to benefit food safety, because if there was a risk of there had been cross contamination from doorknobs or other kinds of things, with people moving from one area of the plant to another, the improved sanitation that's happened in progressive plants or plants that are taking proactive measures to reduce coronavirus risk, that's going to have a positive impact on food safety in terms of reducing food safety risk. And I'm using that as an example because that's probably the one that the example that connects best to food safety, is that idea of improved sanitation and improved standard operating procedures related to sanitation. The improvements around around protecting workers by putting plexiglass or whatever it is in place and keeping workers separate, that may have it's more related to health and safety. The slowing down of lines helps from a health and safety perspective, but that may also have a positive impact on food safety. But again, it's not necessarily impacting the organizational culture related to food safety. It's really impacting the practices related to food safety. And it's only when those practices become embedded long term and it becomes the way we do things. That's a very simplistic way to look at it. It just becomes the way that things are done in the future. Then we can say that there's been an impact on culture. But at this point, it's really a reaction to how are we going to manage the coronavirus risk. And once that coronavirus risk sort of is not perceived as being as high, then I wouldn't be surprised to see some of the changes in say line speed to be offset, and that could then have a negative impact on food safety because the line is going faster and people may not be able to keep up quite as much from a food safety perspective.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Preeta. It was a pleasure, and I learned a lot. I'm sure that my viewers also did. So thank you so much, and have a great afternoon.
Great. I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much. All right. Bye.